You're watching a TGM production. Hello and welcome back to Tom Mason, The Interviewed. Yes, we're back with our first brand new interview of 2026. Nearly said 22. Why? I don't know. To add to anniversary, yesterday was yesterday was that time last year when I did my first interview in 2025, and this year is my first day doing my first interview in 2026. So let's see where it takes us. So let's crack on. My guest is best known for working on making Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy amazing on audio once again. It's the one and only Dirk Manx.
Hello, Tom. Thank you for having me aboard.
You're welcome. So we shall start at the very beginning because Julie Andrews once said it was a good place to start, and so far she's not been wrong. How did you get into the industry I call media?
Well, it was a long time ago now. It was in the late 1970s when I was trying to think what I wanted to do for a career, and I thought I might want to be an actor. And I thought, well, if I'm an actor, I'll probably have periods of time when I'm out of work, so I could train as an actor, but also as a teacher. So I trained as a drama teacher in in Winchester, in a lovely teacher training college, which was called King Alfred's in those days, and they had a fully equipped theatre, which was really the reason I wanted to go, because it had a wardrobe department and scenery and all this stuff you want. And so I came to Winchester, where I still live, and I trained to be a drama teacher and an actor at the same time. And I discovered two fairly important things. First of all, I was really not a very good actor, and I also wasn't a very good teacher. So, so that was a bit of a tricky one. But luckily, someone in the year above me, a friend called Sarah Giles, got a job at the BBC as what they call a studio manager. Now, in those days,
Yeah.
I didn't think you could get in the BBC just like that. I thought the BBC was a kind of closed fortress with no entrances whatsoever, not even secret ones. Anyway, so I said, how did you do this? How did you get into BBC Radio? Because I loved sound at that time, even then. And she said, oh, I just applied for a job. And blow me down, they were, in those days, letting you in if you seemed like the right kind of people. And because I'd done drama and because I'd also done a bit of student TV, we didn't have student radio, we had student TV, a friend of mine and I started. I got in. So that was in 1978. And then I kind of worked my way up the ladder. I thought I wanted to go into television, and I spent some time in television and really didn't like it much. I didn't like Television Centre. I thought it was a bit boring. And radio seemed much more exciting and fun and kind of hidden, a kind of hidden art. So, so in the end, I managed to work my way up to being a producer in BBC Radio, comedy department, the light entertainment department. And sort of that's where kind of things took off for me.
Yeah. And do you think that having been in an environment where you've learned more about the world of teaching drama and being an actor, do you think that that sort of helps you going forward because you've even though you might not have thought yourself as being good at these things, but you've learned the skills so you can detect these type of things when you look at your audio. Does that sort of help you going forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom, because I think it did. I think the fact that that I kind of went in via the side door was good for me, because it meant that I developed skills that weren't necessarily the obvious ones for the job. And I've found over the years that stuff I did as, which I didn't end up doing for a career, that's the teaching side of it, the preparation and organisation side of things, I think has benefited from that. So yeah, definitely. I think that's true. And also, working with actors. I love working with actors and musicians, because in my other life I'm a drummer
Yeah.
in various bands for the last 50 really years. It means that I can see it from their side of the fence, which has been very useful. So I'm kind of, when I work on a radio or an audio production now, I'm in with the actors. I'm not in on the other side of the glass pressing a button saying, do it again, do it again.
Yeah.
I like to be in the room with the actors where the action is, because I can very quickly say a pause key and, and then say, can we try it this way? Or do you think this might work better or whatever? So, yeah, it's a more collaborative thing.
Yeah.
I don't like being the bloke in charge. I like to be one of the troops,
Yeah.
kind of lead from the front.
Yeah. And one of the things you've worked on that s- showcases that audio is still vibrant and still alive because it's like people love it. Go, you Google it and it's like, woo, woo. You just need to take a breather. There's too much love. Um, what was it like working on the radio remastering version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Well, what happened was Hitchhikers, when I joined the BBC in 1978 and
Mm.
became a trainee studio manager, in July 78, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Series 1 had actually happened. It was released in March that year and immediately was a sort of cult hit. And so when we joined in 78, and I went up to Broadcasting House and made a left turn into the Langham Hotel, which was the Langham Hotel years ago and is again now, but then was a BBC training
Mm.
establishment. Went in there, and in our early lectures about working in radio and technical things and so on, all the lecturers were talking about Hitchhikers as being this amazing, groundbreaking achievement, both technically and comedy wise, and with Douglas Adams's genius, who wrote it.
Mm.
Um, and so it was sort of like an unattainable benchmark, really, for me. And also, I didn't quite get it at the time.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working as a lowly studio manager trainee, you did all the kind of rubbish jobs, like you were editing tapes in the newsroom at three in the morning for BBC
Yeah.
World Service, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And in the quiet periods, they had a tape of stuff you could listen to, a bookcase of tapes you could listen to, and there were all the bloopers, all the BBC bloopers going back
Yeah.
years and so on. But there was also, goon shows,
Mm.
things that people enjoyed listening to, and somebody put Hitchhikers up there, just recorded
Yeah.
in one of the channels, and I listened to it, and I thought. I thought, oh, it's kind of Doctor Who with jokes, really. Not sure it's for me. And I know it sounds terribly arrogant, but kind of at the time, it wasn't what I was
Yeah.
into. I was a big fan of comedy. I loved The
Yeah.
Goons with Spike Milligan and all of that stuff, but didn't quite get it. Anyway, over the years, as I worked my way up into Radio Light Entertainment, the comedy department, I listened to it again, and then I got it, and then I thought, oh, right. Now I see what these guys are doing, what Jeffrey Perkins, the producer, and Douglas were doing. So, sort of fast forward 20 years, if you or 10 years, pardon me,
Yeah.
10, 11, 12 years. And I'd been doing these productions of Superman on BBC Radio 4, of all places, off the back of a documentary, a docudrama I did. And my boss called me in, Jonathan James Moore, lovely man, and he called me and he said, Dirk, I've had a phone call from Douglas Adams, who's heard what you're doing and really likes it,
Mm.
and is wondering if you'd be interested in bringing The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy back to the radio.
Yeah.
Because Douglas wrote 2 radio series, then it went to television, then he went to do a bunch of stuff. And he wrote 3 more Hitchhiker's books, which started as books rather than radio series. And what he wanted was somebody to bring them home to radio, as it were, quotes, home. And he heard what I was doing and thought I was the guy, because what I was doing was quite intense, lots of sound effects, music. I try to use the medium visually.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was round at his house before he'd hung the phone up, Douglas. um, and we just we hit it off really well. Of course, I was up for it. So that got me inside the fortress, if you like, or the stockade that was the
Yeah.
Douglas Adams world. And I could hardly believe my luck, and I sort of felt a bit of a fraud because originally I thought, Hitchhikers was a bit, kind of bit nerdy and a bit this and a bit that. And of course, then I realised, of course, no, brilliant, and you're such a lucky to be asked. So in the end, it was great that I was asked, but it was Douglas who very kindly made the offer.
Yeah, and I think that's a good. If someone had to describe Hitchhikers to someone that never heard of it, I think Doctor Who with jokes is the perfect way to describe it
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it what it is that in I think what I've noticed in the world of Doctor Who there is a selection of things. If you like Doctor Who, then you're bound to like Blake Seven and Hitchhikers. You're in that world, so I think that it encapsulates perfectly because the average listener of Hitchhikers is more likely to be a Doctor Who fan as well. But
Hmm.
why do you think that it was successful in its original radio version?
It's funny, isn't it? Because now I saw to John Lloyd the other day, the
Yeah,
producer of QI and Blackadder and all of that stuff. Um, and John actually shared a flat with Douglas
yeah,
in the late 70s, and in fact, to be brutally honest, John kind of dug Douglas out of a hole at the end of the first series of
mm,
Hitchhikers because Douglas had run out of ideas, and John gave him a couple of his, which helped Douglas finish the
yeah,
flipping thing. Um, and John says, "Oh, it's funny. Hitchhikers has dated, hasn't it?" And I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yeah, it's sort of, it's very much a product of its time, of the late 70s." And it's really strange because I don't see it like that at all. And I wonder whether this is John subjectively having been there at the time with
yeah,
Douglas and knowing the agony that Douglas was going through. Because I mean, Douglas was literally like the next day, if nothing happened, was going to like go and join be a clerk in a shipping company or something. I mean, I'm not literally, but he was just going to knock it on the head, and for me and for a lot of people, it
mm,
just hit a sort of zeitgeist at the time. It just turned up at the time when it was most needed. It was like the Beatles arriving in America in
yeah,
1964. It kind of they needed something to part the clouds,
mm,
and I think Hitchhikers. We'd had it was very interesting because it was Star Wars had only come out like the year before.
yeah,
Um, so there was this whole and Doctor Who was it still Tom? I can't remember, but it was. I'm not an expert, but maybe British sci-fi was feeling a little bit stale compared to this amazing technical feat that Star Wars represented in pretty much every term. And then along comes this guy Douglas Adams, and he's written something which is both. Um, there's a science fiction angle to Hitchhikers, which works very well. The idea of in the end, bureaucracy is
yeah,
what is going to kill the universe. It's going to be
yeah,
creatures with clipboards measuring things, and over engineering everything.
yeah,
And I think Douglas, it's there is so much prediction in Hitchhikers which has come true. The genuine people personalities, which now we find AI
yeah,
is presenting us with, the ghastly, creepy, pleasing sort of thing, which the elevators.
yeah.
In the Heart of Gold have got. Thank you for passing by, and all this stuff. And of course, there's Marvin, but then you've got Marvin, who's the eternally kind of presence. There's this wonderful sort of balancing mindedness about Douglas's universe, and the Vogons, where they have just this terrible, terrible poetry,
Yeah.
and all of these things kind of at the time struck a nerve. But I think they've chimed on and on and on. So when John said to me, "Oh, it's dated horribly," I thought, no, I don't agree. Actually, I think it's actually just beginning to come into its own.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that Hitchhikers is what you can see because it translated from radio to TV and it's had books, it's had films, and now it's got that stage show that
Hmm.
I keep seeing like clips of online, and I do think it's generally still hilarious. I think that it might it might seem outdated in certain aspects, but it's still loved. Like if you asked, I don't know, some people, I would be an exception. They would say that they would still love it because they would have seen the film or something. And do
Hmm.
you think that that's why it's still stood the test of time because of the fact that it's had so many different variations, so that different generations have been able to get into it in different ways?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think the one thing that Douglas was always knocking himself out to do was to make a film, and at the end of the day, when the film was finally made,
Mm,
it fell short of what could be done in audio alone, and that was a great shame because he spent so much time and so much nervous energy on that. I wonder, if we might have had him a bit longer without that happening. But be that as it may, I mean, I enjoyed the film for what it was.
Yeah.
And of course, we did a stage show, a stage tour with the original cast
Mm.
10 years ago. So, there is now a current stage show going on at the moment, which has less Douglas in it than I would like and a lot of other people would like. But the fact is, it can be reinvented, I suppose. I think one has to be careful to make sure that Douglas is front and center if
Yeah.
one does do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is timeless, and I think as as somebody will find a way to not mangle what Douglas did,
Yeah.
but at the same time accurately reflect how entirely apposite it is at the moment with AI and all the nonsense we are presented with as
Yeah.
being something wonderful,
Yeah.
when in fact we know for a fact it's pretty inadequate. Human beings, for all their failings,
Yeah.
are quite amazing creatures, and I think Arthur Dent,
Yeah.
with his reactionary stick in the mud, dog in the manger, doesn't want to do it, doesn't want to be got out of bed, really does not want his house pushed down. The guy who has to go into the basement to find the planning application, which is behind a door saying "Beware of the leopard." We are all that person at the
Yeah.
moment. So I think really there's no sign of hitchhikers becoming irrelevant as far as I can see.
Yeah, and when you look at the work of Douglas Adams, you can see why he went into science fiction because his name screams science fiction. Because if you were thinking of a science fiction character and you had to come up with a name, that would be it.
Oh, okay, that's
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that it works when you. There's a few. I can't think of what they are now, but there's a few videos I've seen which are
Mm.
trailers to Big Finish audio dramas. But they're all like lost stories of Douglas Adams or whatever. And what really makes it incredible is that the inspiration you see from them from Hitchhikers. It
Mm.
resonates with everything else. And
It does.
do you think that that's helped develop the way we see science fiction by adding this Douglas Adams slant to it?
I think very much is the you can it's being dystopian. It's looking at the future and saying this is going to be awful, but then finding the funny
Yeah.
aspects of it. And a lot of things do that now. If you watch Severance,
Mm.
with on Apple TV, or quite a lot of the science fiction we've got
Yeah.
today has this sort of kind of like this is Pluribus, the new one
Yeah.
by Vince Thingamajig Gilligan. All of this sort of isn't it awful, but
Yeah.
really you have to laugh. What else can we do? And
Yeah.
I think at the moment, with the world in the hands of the people it's in at the moment, you really do have to laugh, or else you go mad. Yeah, yeah. They're worse than Vogons, really, at the moment.
Yeah.
But hey, let's not get into that.
And one of the other things you've worked on has had this sort of up and down relationship with the culture because it's had several other adaptations in
Hmm.
other forms,
Hmm.
and people are fans of different versions, and they've got every right to be fans of different versions.
Of
But what was
course.
it like directing the audio version of Dirk Gently's Horror Detective Agency?
Yeah. Well, we'd just done Hitchhikers, and it was kind of the obvious next thing to do.
Mm,
The thing about the Dirk Gently books is it's Douglas kind of self-consciously almost trying to be clever.
yeah,
Um, and a lot of people find the books quite hard to stay with,
mm,
to know what's going on. Um, and I wanted to do as accurate an adaptation as I could of the books,
mm,
whilst at the same time making clearer what was going
yeah,
on and why it was happening. And that was interesting because at that time there were no other versions of
yeah,
Dirk Gently. So with the right cast and as clear an adaptation in 6 half hours as
yeah,
I could of the work, I thought we could make something actually potentially
mm,
as meaningful
yeah,
as hitchhikers. And I think on the whole, people have told me they found it. Then they could go back and read the books and understand the books better.
Yeah,
Um, and at the same time, we had a very funny series, and I was very I wanted Harry Enfield to be
yeah,
Dirk
yeah.
because I knew Harry could do it and do
Mm,
a good job. The bonus was we got Olivia Colman to play Janice, his
yeah,
personal assistant, who, of course, I mean, Olivia at that time was a successful actress. We
yeah,
had no idea she'd become an Oscar-winning, sensation
yeah.
later on. Also, she was very pregnant, so it was about the only job she could do at the time. So, but with them, Michael Fenton Stevens and the cast, we ended up with Toby Longworth as the Electric Monk. It was a really it was great because there was no existing other versions, so I didn't have to. Not that it was a problem working with Simon Jones and Jeff McGiven and Mark Wing Davey and Sue Sheridan and all of that,
Mm,
recreating Hitchhikers
yeah,
with the people who were in it. But we went in without kind of preconceptions. I mean, the only real thing about it that I remember that was slightly worrying on the day one was that nobody understood the book. So it was kind of like going to be the acid test of whether the script worked or not. And
yeah,
it did, thank God it worked. So, yeah, so the two series, there was Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, and then the next series was the second book, which is The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul,
yeah,
both of which I was very happy with, and Philip Pope did some perfect music for it. It worked. Jim Carter played the Detective Sergeant Wilkes. It was a fantastic cast. And in the first series, the only thing, the one thing that sticks in my mind that I remember about the acting sessions was on the first series. Harry hadn't done a lot of radio,
yeah,
audio per se, scripted stuff. And I think he came in thinking it was going to be a bit of a doddle. He'd come in and just read the part and then go home and be home in time for an early tea. And then he discovered how hard it actually is voice acting. It's exhausting. In a way, it's more tiring than physically being on a set in costume because you've got to do it all through the voice.
yeah,
You can't do gestures, moves, whatever. So and there was one particular he had a script page of Douglas Adams to read, of a line,
yeah,
a speech by Dirk. And the thing about Douglas was Douglas wrote from A to, if you like, he was going from A to Z, but he'd go through several other alphabets on the way. There was never a straight line between the beginning of a speech
yeah,
and the end of it. There would be all the subclauses and the this, that, a bit like the book in
yeah,
Hitchhikers. So poor old Harry was wrestling with this thing, and I could see on his face he's thinking, "What have I signed up for here?" And then Andrew Sachs, the lovely Andrew Sachs, who earlier on had been made famous as Manuel in Fawlty
yeah,
Towers and all of this, wonderful, wonderful actor, and a lovely human being. He was playing Professor Chronotis, and he had a page
yeah,
speech a couple of pages later, a bit like Harry had had. And of course, Andy had, he prepared.
yeah,
He knew how hard it was going to be. So he just did this one speech down the page, not a fault, not a thing. And Harry was standing next to him. And Harry's kind of jaw sank to the floor as this went on. So that was a bit of a learning curve for him. But no, I was really pleased we did them. And what was very, very pleasing was somebody I know who's a real Douglas expert. He emailed me after they'd been broadcast and he said, for the first time I understood that book. And I thought, well, that job done. That was really great to know. So very satisfying to do that.
yeah. And I think that once you've got like your original version of anything, it's always harder to do the next bit because it gives them actors a lot more pressure. And I think that when they put it to BBC TV, even though Stephen Mangan was quite good at the job, I just just don't think anyone could beat Harry Enfield, and I think he knew that as well. Because I think that once you hear something, do you think that's what's hard about adapting things? Once there's a version already out there, do you think that's what makes it harder, not just on the writers, but also on the people that are actually in the product?
That's an interesting point. I think there is a. I think it's. I think to move from one medium to another means, having to fit a different set of criteria. And the problem about the visual media is, and this is why I've really never needed to go and work in television or film, is because you've immediately got 20 more people who think they know what's best for it and who want the whole thing rewritten. And in the end, if Douglas Adams survives at all, it's, kind of, you're lucky.
Yeah,
And I love Stephen Mangan. He's a mate, and we've worked together a lot. And I thought his Dirk was, a perfect valid way
yeah,
to do it. But I think the thing about audio is, you can not only can you put the kettle on and do the ironing while you're listening to something and lose yourself in it, but you do lose yourself in it. You become a kind of participant. You're in the room with the if it's mixed right and sounds good,
yeah,
and you can forget about the fact you're just listening. Your imagination takes over, and I think television is literal. The visual media
yeah,
is literal. It either is on the screen or it isn't. You can't infer stuff, you can't imply stuff, you have to show it. And that's its big downfall for me. Whereas in audio, it lives in the best CGI computer on the planet, which is your brain.
yeah.
And there's no AI needed. Your brain does all the work. It's actual intelligence. And I did think at least the BBC, at least the BBC television series of Dirk Gently attempted to stay somewhat
Yeah.
closer to the source material, whereas I felt the Netflix version, or was it HBO? But anyway, the American version
Yeah,
just took Douglas, threw out Douglas, and made its own thing up,
yeah,
which is kind of has become a feature of certain creative pursuits, and I don't agree with it, and I'd rather people left Douglas in the equation. One thing at the end of our Hitchhikers live show, our radio tour, was the last thing on our big projection screen behind us was Douglas.
yeah,
So he could get a round of applause because he well earned it.
yeah. And I think that when you hear of stories, and I think it happens to multiple like authors, like Agatha Christie has it a lot where in the early days of her films, she wasn't too happy with the films and she was a little bit sullied in the water. Do you think that when it comes to adapting things for like screen and audio, do you think it makes the author more worried? Do you think there's more pressure on trying to impress the author rather than trying to make sure that it's right for the people that have commissioned it?
I think actually, my wife used to work for the wife of Paul Theroux, the novelist, and who did things like Mosquito Coast, which was a film with Harrison Ford years ago,
Yeah,
and things like that. And Paul said, once the film rights have been sold, I forget about it
yeah,
because I know it won't be what I wrote. And I think that's what a lot of novelists will do.
yeah,
They think, well, this is now going to be put to a committee of people who are going to change it irrevocably because, if you send it if a producer takes it, then the producer's got a budget which they have to work to, and also they will have a studio who's telling them what the audience wants to see. Oh, we need lots more CGI throwing people against buildings and all of this.
yeah,
And then you've also got a lead actor who comes in, so you hire Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford then says, "I'm going to send this to my rewrite guy
yeah,
because I haven't got enough lines," and so on and so forth. And so the thing spins out of the control of the original creative vision. And I think that's a very interesting point that you've raised because, in fact, that's exactly why Douglas wanted to make the Hitchhiker's film himself,
yeah,
because he wanted to be responsible for his own work. And the tragedy that he died 4 years before the movie was released, and most definitely before it was made.
mm,
Um, uh, it's very interesting to speculate what the film would have been like if
yeah,
Douglas had lived on.
yeah,
Would it have been the same? Because there's stuff in like Hummer Kavula and stuff like that which Douglas definitely wrote,
yeah,
but there's also stuff he didn't write. and it would be very interesting if he'd had total control over it, what we would have seen. So, yeah, I'm not sure authors can are in a position to save their babies when
Yeah.
a bunch of film producers come in. You've kind of, you've surrendered it to the Frankenstein monster creators then.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that I think there is a few occasions where you hear stories of the author really loving the TV, and it's like Poirot, for example, with David Suchet. That's what I can think of that's a positive reaction because you know that Agatha Christie. I don't know if she ever saw it. I think the story is some relation to Agatha Christie had said she would have loved it, and David
Mm.
Suchet was like, great. I'm going to do this forever, and then I'm going to do programs about Agatha Christie because I can do. Because that's what he does now. He did a program recently about Agatha Christie. But do you think that it's good? Do you think that it's good when it does stick to the originals, like as close to the original story as possible? Because obviously we've got budget constraints. Do you think that it makes the end product better because it stayed as close as possible?
Yeah, I think it does. I think the reason that Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is revered is because he and Fran Walsh stuck as close as they could to the source material, and I think that's made particularly clear by then trying to turn The Hobbit, which is a slim children's book, into three epic movies,
Yeah,
which means stretching the material. I mean, it's the opposite problem to a lot of books where all the good stuff, in quotes, is
yeah,
kind of cut out. So, yeah, I think that really is proof that, when it's done well, it endures. It becomes very special to people.
yeah. And one of the other things you've worked on that, as you mentioned, that is was special to a lot of people, and they would have been so enthused, so excited, and generally it's in the area where, or it's in the years where Audible was trying to work out how do they adapt, how do they make audio the next big thing within audiobooks and audio adaptations. But what was it like working on the X-Files Cold Case?
Ah, well, that was, yeah, now, well, that's an interesting one because that didn't start as being my idea. That was with a dear friend of mine called William DeFries, Bill DeFries, who, as an actor, was my Spider-Man when I did the Amazing Spider-Man
Yeah,
in 1995. God help me, and was brilliant. I mean, that was still one of my favourite productions ever because the fun we had on that was ridiculous. And Bill, uh, he he was an actor and he was a voice trainer. He was an acting teacher, and he was in London. And he went back to the States, and he got so into doing radio drama, audio drama, by the adventures we had on Spidey, particularly, that he started his own production company up in Maine, in Portland, Maine. And it was Bill who we were talking about doing lots of things together, but in the end, I had work to do. I had the Douglas stuff to do, and then I was doing other stuff. And Bill wanted to do the X Files, and he got it into Audible, and all credit to him because it's not easy to sell stuff into these big companies, particularly on the Americans on the other side of the pond. Um, and Audible wanted someone to kind of be involved who had a bit more experience, which was me.
yeah,
So I went and joined Bill and his partner Fred Greenhalgh
mm,
to help them with it, and I was really kind of there wasn't much for me to do. The guys were doing their own directing. They got Gillian and David to reprise Scully and Mulder.
mm,
I was I didn't go to David's sessions because they were in the States and I was working on Alien over here, but I did go to Gillian's session in London, and I was able to offer a few words of help here and
yeah.
there. But really, it was Bill and Fred's show. In fact, it was Bill and Fred's Excellent Adventure, is what we called it. But what I was able to do was bring my kind of because the other thing I do is I sound design a lot of my own work because I like to, I kind of like to finish. Having started the painting, I like to
Yeah,
finish it. Well, in this case, they started the painting, and
yeah,
I did the sound design. So, I was involved intimately, but I wasn't hands on. Um, but I was very lucky. I was lucky enough to um, do San Diego Comic Con with David, which was really fun, and we met and got on very well. Worked with Gillian, and she's obviously a superb actress. The only thing I'm sad about, and this is something that I still scratch my head over, is that Audible did a deal for only the first two of three graphic novels that Joe wrote
yeah.
of this series. So the concluding chapters weren't there, which was infuriating because it was a good story and we could have finished it.
Yeah. And do you think that because of it being a successful television series, do you think that sort of helped Audible to go, yes, we could do this? Because I think that or what I've noticed from Audible is that you like taking punts on things that you might not expect to get the dramatic retelling. Do you think that that's why the X-Files in particular was successful because it had that fan base that were happy to take it wherever medium they wanted to?
I think anything. I think Audible, understandably, if there's already an audience for something,
Yeah,
which will probably buy that something, they will go for the something.
yeah,
Whereas if you go in with a play about, I don't know, coal miners in Czechoslovakia in the 1920s, they
yeah,
probably won't jump at that.
yeah,
Whereas something which also already has stars attached,
yeah,
that's a big deal for them because they do like to have stars attached.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. And I think that it became I think it showcases that the appetite was there for X-Files
mm,
and it showcased that even though it wasn't on TV, you could still do a lot with audio and I think that it allowed people to re-fall in love with the medium. Do you think that that is a good thing when this happened because people that weren't aware of like that end of the world of audio, do you think that that helped to showcase that this is what audio can do, not just a bloke saying,
absolutely.
listen to the Clash.
Absolutely. My whole career has been based on I've done a lot of original stuff over my career, but I've done
Yeah,
an awful lot of stuff that already has an audience
yeah,
from comic books and popular television and film in terms of the alien stuff I did.
yeah,
And the real reason for that is because for a very long time it looked like audio was a dying medium or
yeah,
audio storytelling, and I felt I'd found a way of telling stories in audio that was more visual than
yeah,
just the radio play set in a studio, the kind of Archers, which
yeah,
is nothing wrong with the Archers, don't get me wrong, but there is this sort of, more Vicar kind of doors opening and,
yeah,
what have you, and people playing an outdoor scene, but you can clearly hear they're indoors by the acoustic, this sort of thing.
yeah,
And I was inspired by the sound design of people like Randy Tom and Ben Burt and Lon Bender and all the American guys who were making movies. And I wanted what we were doing to sound like a movie.
yeah,
And if it sounds like a movie and the script is written with the grammar of a movie script, with the storytelling economy of lines where there is no filler material. It's all really pithy and strong. That was what I wanted to do, and the way. So then, having developed in my head, I mean, other people were doing it, but actually directing it towards trying to wow people.
yeah,
Having done that, then the idea that I how could I get as wide an audience as possible? And the way you get as wide an audience as possible is to do stuff they want to tune into. So
yeah,
you do Spider-Man, Superman, Batman, Judge Dredd,
yeah,
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Alien,
yeah,
The Sandman. These are all big. These are in movie terms.
yeah,
These are big, big tentpole things, and these have been that's been the reason I've been doing it. And in a way, I suppose, to the detriment of me doing original stuff, and then people think, oh well, Dirk, he's good at the technicals, but
yeah,
he just retreads, existing tires. Well, it's a kind of, yeah, but then on the other hand, It's lovely. I get emails or messages on social media from people who say, "Do you know, when I'm having a terrible time, I go home, I put the covers over my head, and I listen to whatever it is, Flywheel, Shyster and Flywheel, the Marx Brothers shows, whatever it is." And it's just a lovely thing that you can give someone a refuge from the world. I think it's the mental health business
Yeah,
that we're in, really. It's
yeah,
making people feel better. On a bad day, you go home and you can lose yourself in it.
yeah. And I think that I've discovered this over the last few years, and with having because obviously when TV came around, people were probably not listening to radio as much as they once were. Do you think that because of the uh built-in because of podcasts and the idea that you can record whatever you want and you have people creating their own audio dramas and then Audible coming into play, and do you think that that's helped like regenerate the world of audio because there's more eyes on audio now, like Netflix buying podcasts to put on their platform, which is an odd thing to do, but they'll do themselves. And do you think that it's helped to say to the world, well, radio's still here. Yes, you can listen to whoever on breakfast radio, but you can also listen to your favorite TV show that's been adapted for radio. Do you think that the world of that's now evolving because of there's so much light on it?
Definitely, it has helped that the internet came along and saved audio's bacon,
Yeah,
because the BBC were on it their own a lot in terms of radio drama. I mean,
yeah,
that was the only game in town for years.
yeah,
And then in the mid 1990s, suddenly the internet turned around and started podcasts
yeah,
were a thing now, and it's still, the jury's still out on what podcast actually means, apart
yeah,
from being named after an iPod. But always my
yeah,
feeling was back in the 90s, in the 80s
yeah,
and 90s, that all the people who were on the tube train with me going to work in the morning, who were listening to music on their Sony Walkmans as they were at the time, couldn't they be listening to drama and or of comedy, losing themselves in something else? So the advent of the internet as a way of streaming
yeah,
was wonderful, and obviously rejuvenated my career and gave me new avenues of ways to sell things
yeah,
to people. Audible, whoever else, Penguin Random House, or whoever's doing it. The only thing I would say is that inevitably, as more people discovered audio, the spoken word audio,
yeah,
and I don't mean listeners, listeners is good news, but producers who realize that this is a cheap way of banging out endless amounts of product.
yeah,
And in terms of podcasts, we're on tight budget, stuff that really wasn't edited afterwards. It
yeah,
was just put out wholesale,
yeah,
just solid lumps of people umming and erring and what did you have for breakfast and so on.
yeah,
It rather devalued the currency of what audio is capable of, and I found that I've been disappointed
yeah,
by, because I think there's a lot of substandard stuff. At the same time, I'm hugely thrilled that it's rekindled, especially on the other side of the Atlantic,
yeah,
a love of spoken word drama, where people are actually wanting to make this stuff because they now find out about things like trailblazing stuff like the X science fiction radio series of the 50s, and the Firesign theatre people in the 60s and 70s, and the Harvard Lampoon lot.
yeah,
The Americans kind of forgot they had that. And of course, Orson Welles in the
yeah,
1930s, they
yeah,
forgot they had this great tradition
yeah,
of making groundbreaking radio drama, and now they're doing it. The only thing is that I still hear stuff that's supposed to be cutting edge. The new thing is to say, oh, well, this reinvents audio drama. Well, I've yet to hear anything that reinvents audio drama. What I do hear is stuff that thinks it's making inventive stuff, but all the audio, I love the ones which say we're really cutting edge and all the voices are panned in the middle
yeah,
and all the sound effects are hard left and right, and the whole thing is completely uninvolving to the ears. And this is something that there's far too much of, and I wish people would go away and think about the medium and read up on what
yeah,
they're doing. There's very few of them. There are people out there making amazing stuff. Casey Wayland's doing We're Alive and stuff like that. And lovely Fred Greenhouse, who worked with Billy Dufresne, who sadly died. Fred's just for the last 3 years been working at Realm Media making Batman High Volume,
Yeah.
which I was, I felt very privileged to be asked to advise on with Roshan Singh. There are people out there making high quality stuff, but there are also people out there making money off of high end titles
Mm.
who really haven't done their homework, and that disappoints me, because if you're going to work in a medium, if you can't do the best work possible, go and go and sweep the streets. Give someone else a chance.
Yeah, and I think that in my experience of the world of audio drama, you can sort of see that there's more. So when I first fell into this world, you then realise, wow, there is so much. And I think that the one that you see all the love for in my world mainly is the Doctor Who ones, because you can tell
Yeah.
that there's new ways of telling them, and you can tell more stories than you could do on TV. Do you think that that's what makes franchises more wanting to have a go at audio, because you know that if they've got this really excellent writer, but it was like far too expensive for
Mm.
TV or film, do you think that that's why you get like things like Doctor Who having more spin-offs on audio than they do on TV?
I think actually Doctor Who's a good example because, of course, I failed to mention the exemplary Big Finish just now. The stuff that Jason and Nick have done there is astonishing, and yes, it gives it as a fan you get more product, and there's the gatekeepers, the quality control at Big Finish is high. It's not just any old stuff, and they do other drama as well and comedy, to their credit. And of course, if you're actually a creative in the business, and there are only so many writers who can work on a series of Doctor Who television. I mean, there's RTD, and then there's 2 or 3 others that he's handpicked to do a series. If you've got talented writers out there who can turn out
Yeah,
really quality stuff, the Robert Valentines and the Paul Magras and the all these really good writers out there, then this should be this is the thing that I've loved when I was a BBC producer, and funnily enough, one of the reasons I left being a BBC producer, because when I was a senior producer at the BBC, I could give writers their first job, and that was the best thing possible. So people like Julian Dutton, Peter Bainham, who then worked with Amanda Iannucci, Debbie Barham, sadly no longer with us, but monster talents who I was privileged enough to be able to give among their first actual I've forgotten the word. Contracts to. I could actually contract them as writers. They would be earning a living as
yeah,
writers, and I had that in my power. And they were talent that were not only coming into the business, would then go on to greater things. That's the beauty of audio. It's not only is it a peerlessly visual way of giving entertainment, it's also a fantastic launch pad for talent.
yeah. And I think that the next step for audio, and because I've not noticed this, it might be out there, I just might not be looking in the right places. But I think they now need to start broadcasting the like award ceremonies for audio, because you've got like every award ceremony under the
Mm,
sun for TV
mm, mm.
and film. But I think that that's the last thing audio needs, because it's such a big medium, and there is like big awards that you can think of, like the British Podcast Awards, but none of them get broadcast
No,
on traditional media. Do you
no.
think that that's a downside to audio, because these
Yeah,
people aren't being represented?
yeah. I mean, it's nice to win the prizes and so on. I suppose so. I think probably it would just make boring television because it's all audio stuff. And
Yeah,
television people traditionally don't understand audio
yeah,
because they think in pictures. And audio people think of television people as vidiots. So I don't really, but
yeah,
it's a funny expression.
yeah,
No, I don't think it'll ever get televised,
yeah,
and I don't think it'll be put on the radio either. It's a uniquely tricky medium to make in a
yeah,
fragmentary way. But all of that said, it's wonderful that we do have ways of rewarding and recognizing those in the business. Although some of the awards may be where people pay money to get an award, I would say that's probably not an award, not so much an award.
yeah,
What
yeah.
I say. But
Yeah.
I should move on quickly from that, Tom, in case somebody wants to sell me an award.
And moving swiftly on, but one of the things you've worked on is a thriving what's it, the thriving franchise because it's had a smash hit TV series, it's had smash hit films, it's had that weird film where it merged another franchise together, and some people say it makes no sense. I also agree because it slightly makes no sense, but again, I'm not an expert. But what was it like working on the audio edition of Alien: Sea of Sorrows?
Well, the first one we did was called Alien Out of the Shadows. Sea of Sorrows was the second one. No, the third one we made. It was Out of the Shadows, River of Pain, Sea of Sorrows.
Yeah.
And then we made the unmade script for Alien 3, the one
Mm.
that had Corporal Hicks and Bishop the android in. And we had Michael Bean and Lance Henriksen playing those parts in that fourth one, which
Yeah.
was brilliant. So I was out in LA recording the guys, and we had a lot of fun on that. But doing the Alien, being asked to do Out of the Shadows, the first one we did, which was
Mm.
Tim Lebbon's book, and I adapted it. When Steve Carsey, who was then the commissioning editor at Audible in London, said, "Do you want to do Alien?" I sort of said yes. And as I said yes, I thought, now that's very interesting because your principal protagonist in this actually doesn't speak. It's
Yeah.
just a monster. Um, and then I read Tim's book,
Yeah.
and he very cleverly set the action between the first and the second Alien films,
Yeah.
or Hot on the Heels,
Yeah.
and very cleverly managed to get Ripley to be in it, to be
Yeah.
a central character in it, and had a very clever MacGuffin and way of putting her back into hypersleep and having her lose the memory of this happening at the end of this particular story. But what it was a challenge because I thought what I need to do, well, first of all, I have to make it as scary as an alien film.
Yeah.
And if you haven't heard Out of the Shadows, I do urge you. That's my favourite of the three that we
Yeah.
did actually, because it's got a small cast and it's very like the original movie. You are kind of on your own
Mm.
against this thing, and what was and the first thing I thought is I've got to have the sound effects. I've got to have the right sound effects for this. And we were talking to Fox at that time, who had the rights.
Yeah.
Now it's owned by Disney, who own Fox. One fish swallows another, and there, not long before the game Alien Isolation had come out,
Mm.
which was superb. It absolutely recreated
Yeah.
the original Nostromo story and kind of followed on from it, with Ripley's daughter supposedly looking for her mum, and and they had some wonderful special effects. Byron Butler was responsible for a lot of them, really good. And so basically, I rang up the games company. I've forgotten who they're down in Horsham, lovely bunch. Anyway, and said, "Have you got the effects?" And they said, "Oh, they're all with Fox."
Mm.
So I said to the guys at Fox, look, it's going to save me. I can make these sound effects
Yeah.
myself, but it would be much easier for me to use it. Oh, yeah, sure. And they just sent me the whole lot. So
Wow.
it's like, okay, I'm covered on all of that. Now I've got to get the cast, because the thing about Alien is it's never about the monster. It's about the people trying to escape the monster or hunt the monster. And that's why Alien works so well, because it's not actually about the monster.
Yeah.
As soon as you make it about the monster, a human being doesn't. I can identify with people, not with
Yeah.
monsters.
Yeah.
Well, some people might argue with that, of course, say that I
Yeah.
fall into the latter category. Anyway, and so then we got this fantastic cast, and the mad thing about it was that Sigourney Weaver was working on Avatar or whatever at the time,
Yeah.
couldn't do it. And so I had to think of an actress who could sound like Ripley, and it was the weirdest thing. But Laurel Lefko, who had played the lead in The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul,
Yeah.
and also in the Stephen Baxter sci-fi book that I adapted in 1999, Voyage,
Yeah.
about first man mission to Mars. Something about Laurel's voice, I thought, it's kind of Sigourney-esque.
Yeah.
And I went into my old Voyage session, and I found a bit of her speaking, and I lowered her voice a semitone with a tuning,
Yeah.
and it's pretty damn close to Sigourney Weaver. So I said, I kind of rang her. I said, "Look, I've got a great job, but do you mind being someone else?" And what do you mean? What do you mean? I said, "Would you be Sigourney Weaver?" And she said, "Oh yeah, that would be fun." And she did it, and she was brilliant. So she played Ripley through all three series, and genuinely people did put. I didn't know that wasn't Sigourney Weaver until the credits at the end, which was very made me very happy. And one of the my favourite bits is in this Alien 3 that we did for Audible, which
Yeah.
if you've got a subscription, I urge you to check out because it is the script that William Gibson. Necromancer author William Gibson wrote, which was eventually turned down, and has got Michael Biehn and Lance in it, Lance Henriksen. Um, I use Laurel for Sigourney, and the beginning of this story, the first sort of 15 minutes, is Lance telling from Bishop's point of view the story of aliens to
Yeah.
set up the new story, and it worked. I've got Lance and Michael, and not Sigourney redoing stuff from Aliens, the Jim Cameron movie,
Yeah.
and I was so pleased with it because it actually sounded like I just lifted soundtrack, and I actually hadn't. We'd recreated all the stuff. So yeah, that was the Alien experience. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. It was really good fun.
Yeah. And now that we've got to this point in the interview where we've learned more about you and we can sense a passion for audio, for anyone out there that has the passion for audio but wants to break into the audio area of the industry, what advice would you give them to break into that area of the media industry?
Well, it's good news and bad news. I'll start with the bad news. The bad news is it's a very much atomized industry from when I joined the BBC, and there was a training course for studio managers, and then one could rise to be a producer if one had the talent and the desire and got the recognition. And I ended up in the comedy department because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't like television and so on and so forth. Um, so I kind of blundered into what I do now and then found that I loved it and carried on with it. And luckily, the internet and streaming came up just as I was wondering how I would feed my kids.
Yeah.
So I could do that. But the thing about that is that also the internet and streaming did come up. And that is a place where there's a very good, if anyone's listening and wants to get into audio, there's a very good group called Audio Drama Hub on Facebook. And it's both professionals, there's people at my level, and there's complete newbies
Yeah.
coming in who want to do it. And it's the kind of information exchange, and people ask questions, what's the best microphone to do so and so? And is it better to have all the actors in one room or down the end of the line? Open brackets, it's better all in the same room, close brackets. The and the thing is, people Casey Wayland over in the States, who is a lovely guy. He was, he's an ex serviceman. He was in the Iraq War, I think, or something like that. He came back and he had this real passion for audio.
Yeah.
And he started making stuff. We're Alive, his production is him making stuff. And now, he gets recognition, he wins prizes, and then he's making, and then people like Audible come along and think, oh, this guy's good. And then, he starts doing jobs for them. Now, obviously, the market is limited by how much budget is out there and from the big companies, how much interest and so on. But the fact is, if you have an itch to tell stories, visual stories, and you understand how you can be visual in sound and you want to learn more, and you are you have friends who are similarly talented, you can do it
Yeah.
with fairly minimal outlay
Yeah.
and get it heard by putting it on the web. I'm not saying you're going to get huge audiences to start with,
Yeah.
but if you come up with the right idea,
Yeah.
and you lock in the right kind of talent, you get to make stuff. And the other thing is as well, this is stuff you can do with your mates for fun. You've got something. Get a classic script off the internet, or write something yourself, and then get people who like acting, local Amdram drama students, your mates, who are from the pub, whatever it is, get them round, get some beer and some pizza in, rig up a microphone, and do a table read of a script, and see how, even in that rather primitive situation, the magic can happen. And then imagine adding sound effects
Yeah.
you create yourself, or music if you have a friend who's a bit of a musician, and you can begin to cook something up. And then there's this whole other thing where you then do it in front of people as a performance.
Yeah.
People go out and do radio style performances of scripts with sound effects and music played in and so on, and it's the best fun you can have, mostly, you know.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in it, it's the easiest thing to find out about in
Yeah.
terms of playing.
Yeah, and on the internet, especially in the Doctor Who realm, which is where you hear a lot of fan audios, the one that's recent I've listened to that I think can match the heights of your big ones is Doctor Who Red Twilight, because it has a group of people that when you see they've done visual stuff that they look the part ready for to be in Doctor Who, to be fair, but the audio is because they're just fans of the show. You can
Mm.
see the passion. Do you think that that's what helps when you trying to get stuff out there so that when you want to go to these big companies, you have a mini portfolio? Do you think having that passion for that area you've chosen really helps when you want to take it to the next level?
I think any passion for anything is vital, and enthusiasm and so on. I think it could be Doctor Who, it could be Star Wars, it could be Alien, it could be anything, it could be the Navy Lark. I don't know.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter. I think what you do have to do is be aware of the fact that you won't always get to do the things you really want to do, and so if you go in on riding just this one horse, saying, well, I'm really into, I'm very, very keen on Rent a Ghost.
yeah,
That's what I'm a big fan on, and
yeah,
that's what I want to
yeah,
work on. And the people say to you, well, hate to tell you this, but there's not any real, audience that are willing to pay money for Rent a Ghost now. And you think, maybe I should have just said I'm just generally interested in making kind of comedy, spooky
yeah,
stuff. You know, it's kind of
yeah,
use a little bit of common sense about the fact that in the end, anyone who's going to give you money to make something is doing that because they expect to make more money back from
yeah,
selling it. So you have to have a kind of practical hat on about that. That said, if you're mad about Rent a Ghost and you're not going to try and sell anything for money, so you're not going to contravene any copyright that
yeah,
Rent a Ghost may have in it, go to it. Make some funny audios for you and your mates.
yeah.
It's the best fun you can have.
Yeah, and I think that thinking about it now, I think that Rentals and the Neighbourlands would be perfect to turn into drama, like a freshman situation where the reboot's a gritty drama. I think having
Mm.
Rent Girls indefinitely as a gritty drama would make it even more funnier because it'd be like making it weird, like having a pantomime horse in a drama in
I, th-
audio would be brilliant.
I, you can do it. You can absolutely do it, Tom. It's yours. Go to it, Tom.
And and so as we draw a close to this excellent, glorious, wonderful, dictionary defining interview,
Excellent, excellent.
yeah, yeah,
All of which I agree with.
yeah. Where without giving away your home address, where can people track you down on the interweb?
Well, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Blue Sky. I don't do Twitter. So there, I have got a website. The email address on it, I'm not sure it still works. I will check that. But yeah, they can. But I mean, the best way to kind of be in touch with me is kind of just listen to the work, really, because I'm, I'm not exactly winding down, but I'm very picky and choosy about what I do. I generally on social media, I'm posting stuff that I think would help. Blue Sky, particularly, is where if I think someone's looking for writers or sound designers or there's a useful course available, I will repost that. So if you need pointers as to what might help, and also I must stress the Audio Drama Hub on Facebook is such a useful resource and it's very, very good.
And so there we have it. It's the first interview 2026 completed, and it'll take me quite a while to say the word 2026 instead of 2025 because the word five rolls off your tongue a lot better than six. No other number after that is necessary. And so, thank you guys for watching. And remember, no, I've forgotten.